Britain, the land of commonwealth and prosperity, was in uproar. Old Winston Churchill, leader of this democracy, felt certain that blood, sweat, toil, and tears his people had to offer would be enough to stop their foreign foe. He'd never feared the sea nor the skies, and believed that the might of the enemy was no match for their morale. So Churchill stood, watching from his window as the last remaining children boarded the train. His weathered eyes scanned the horizon, anticipating the fire.
Hitler, ruler of the unjust world, had dispatched his army to London to take the city and all that it stood for, engulf it in a fiery inferno, and destroy all hope for an ally. His plan of ultimate destruction was codenamed Operation Sea Lion.
He wanted air supremacy. He wanted his team of pilots to rule the skies. The Luftwaffe, his men of the air, were trained to combat any threat. He felt sure that the British would be outmatched. If he removed them as a threat, then Europe would succumb to his will. No one would dare stand against him. Also, he would remove the French as a threat to his puppet state.
All this Churchill knew and more. He'd anticipated this long before. He was ready to take a stand. He would ensure that daily life continued. The people of Britain would not be hindered by this attack. They would endure.
Hitler had a plan, a very evil plan. He had the Luftwaffe bomb British airfields and factories. Night after night and day after day, his men attacked with the full of their might. Churchill felt little. So a few factories were down and a few planes had been lost. He refused to concede. As he sat drinking his afternoon tea, he relayed an order for his people to have heart and fight on.
Hitler was very angry. Not only did he have the British to worry about, but the French too. He'd taken France long before and made it his own little puppet state. But the British had helped them recover and were planning to take back their country from across the sea. If the Luftwaffe continued to fail, how would he ensure victory? And then it struck him. He was focusing solely on ruining the Brits' supplies. He needed to take the source. And so began the bombing of Britain's pride and joy, London. It was time to initiate the Blitz.
For 57 days and nights, the Luftwaffe rained fire from the skies. The Royal Air Force, or RAF, were diligent and protected their motherland with an iron fist. But still the British would not concede. The bombings had strengthened British morale. The RAF had radar that could anticipate any attack, and all hope for seizure had been lost with the tide.
Hitler was furious. His tired soldiers came calling back home each day tired and hungry and quite low on fuel. And so the poor dictator had no choice but to withdraw his force and leave Britain in resentful peace. Britain was enthralled. They'd bested the German enemy and were ready to take back Europe. The US was ready to fight Japan. All was well.
Churchill was happy. Britain was alive and thriving once more, but he wondered as he tipped his hat to the public what could have happened if Hitler had succeeded.
If Hitler had succeeded in taking Britain, either through negotiation or by force, the U.S. would have no reason for entering the war in Europe. Britain was their greatest ally, and without them, they wouldn't have had a chance. Britain would have succumbed to Germany, and the U.S. would have focused solely on the war in the Pacific.
Or what if the Germans annexed the nation into its empire? This would mean that the RAF would have become part of the Luftwaffe, along with other military spoils of war. This would mean that the Luftwaffe would have radar, enabling them to conquer more territory and anticipate attack from any side. This in turn would give Hitler an advantage over all of Western Europe. With his newly gained resources, Hitler would be able to conquer Russia. After the fall of the Russian Empire, Hitler would both eliminate his last European enemy and the root of communism. His last enemy would be the US. He would ally himself with Japan and attack the US on its western side.
Or maybe, if Hitler won the Battle of Britain, he would carry out his invasion plans for the nation. Winston Churchill would be removed from the power as Prime Minister. British morale would be at an all-time low, and negotiations would have to be made concerning the government. A once democratic society would have been extremely fascist.
But they did endure. All was well. Now old Adolf was on the run, looking for new ways to best them. Although he was strong, Britain had proven they were a force to be reckoned with. The end.